massacre of the innocents refers to a grim incident in Matthew's Christmas story. In the account, Herod the Great orders the killing of all boys 2 years old or under in the area of Bethlehem. Each year, the Feast of Holy Innocents is celebrated shortly after Christmas by Catholics, Orthodox, Lutherans, and Anglicans to remember their suffering. But some historians and biblical critics regard the story to be a legend and not history. Well, why exactly is that? Critics say that Matthew is trying too hard to present Jesus as the new Moses. If you remember the Exodus, Pharaoh orders the killing of all male Hebrew babies as they were born. The Hebrew midwives hid Moses, and you know the rest of the story. Matthew, wanting to draw some parallels, cooked the whole thing up. Critics also say that Matthew took an obscure passage about Rachel weeping for her children and wrapped a story around it. The proof for this theory is that no other gospel author mentions the event. Josephus doesn't mention it either, and he gives a ton of details about the life and crazy times of Herod the Great. The problem with this argument is that it's a weak argument from silence. Bethlehem wasn't a booming metropolis, and neither was the surrounding area. We're talking about a population of 1,200 to 1,500 tops, and probably no more than a dozen children were killed. It also isn't an event of civic or military interest, so there's no reason to suppose that Josephus would have reported it even if he was aware of it. The other thing is we note similar silence outside of the Gospels. So for example, Josephus and Philo both say nothing about the banishment of the Jews from Rome by Emperor Claudius in 51 AD. This event was a big deal, and we'd expect a comment, but we don't get one. However, the 2nd century Roman historian Suetonius does mention it, and Luke also says something about it in Acts 18:2. Luke is our only 1st century source about the event, and despite Josephus' silence, all historians do believe that it actually happened. An argument from silence about ancient authors is rarely a basis for dismissing the direct positive testimony of a contemporary writer. Plus, let's think about what we know about King Herod. He operated like a super paranoid mob boss. Real or perceived threats to his authority got dealt with violently. Upon becoming the quote-unquote king of the Jews, his first order of business was to purge the Hasmonean family of any rivals. He had Mattathias Antonigus executed because he saw him as a threat. He also had the elderly John Hyrcanus II strangled over an alleged plot to have him overthrown. Herod also had his brother-in-law, the high priest, drowned in a swimming pool because he believed the Jews wanted him to be their ruler instead of him. Out of paranoia, he had his mother-in-law and second wife executed, and then 3 of those sons through that marriage were also murdered to top things off. Herod seemingly got crazier in his latter years. In the last few years of his life, he had 300 military leaders executed, and then a bit later, some Pharisees prophesied his kingdom would not fall to his heirs, so he rounded them up and had them all bumped off. With prophecies like these already circulating within his kingdom, is it any wonder that Herod wanted to kill the baby Jesus when the Magi revealed that the new king of the Jews was born? Also, we know that Jeremiah 31:15 wasn't something that the early rabbis considered to be messianic, so why exactly would Matthew be moved to use the passage unless actual historical events suggested it? So far, what I've said undercuts the negative case, but is there any positive evidence for the events that took place in Matthew 2? Indeed there is. Let's check out Matthew 2:22. But when he, Joseph, heard Archelaus was reigning over Judea in the place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there, and being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. Now, let's put on our historian hat for a moment and think about this verse. Number 1, why would Galilee provide a sanctuary city of sorts for the Holy Family? Number 2, why isn't Archelaus called king like his father Herod? Number 3, and most importantly, why was Joseph troubled about the news that Archelaus was ruling in his father Herod's place? To answer the first question, we need to go to Josephus. He tells us that after Herod the Great's death, his domain was divided between his 3 sons. Archelaus received authority in Judea, but not in Galilee. Galilee fell under the jurisdiction of his brother Herod Antipas. So this explains why if Joseph was avoiding dealing with Archelaus, he decided to go to Nazareth rather than back to Bethlehem. So why didn't Archelaus go by the title of king? His army called him king, but Archelaus refused to assume the title until he submitted his claims to Caesar Augustus. And even his own brother opposed him because of his reputation for cruelty. In 4 BC, Augustus gave him the greater part of Samaria, Judea, and Idumea, but only under the title of ethnarch. Archelaus continued to act like a savage brute, and the Jews complained that he was violating Caesar's commands. Eventually, Augustus was so fed up with Archelaus that he was banished to Gaul and stripped him of his title in 6 AD. This was about 10 years after he gained his authority, and in the 12th year after Jesus' birth. Interestingly enough, Luke tells us that the first time Jesus goes to Jerusalem for Passover was when he was 12 years old. Now, in answering the third and final question, by now you've probably picked up where this was going. When Joseph heard that Archelaus was reigning in his father's place, he knew this was bad news. He already fled to Egypt to get away from one homicidal psycho, only to find out there was another in his place. Archelaus gained his bloody reputation from ordering the brutal slaughter of 3,000 Jews at Passover. Here's what happened. There were some Jews who were outraged that Roman shields were posted over the gate of the temple. This was breaking the Decalogue's command against graven images, as the shield had eagle's wings on them. so these devout Jews cut them down and were immediately executed. As you might guess, this didn't go over very well with the locals. Thousands annually flocked to Passover, and the story spread rapidly through the crowds. A large group of Jews gave a small regiment of Roman soldiers a piece of their mind, and tensions rose to the point where the Jews stoned the soldiers. Archelaus got wind of it and decided to pull "there's a new sheriff in town" routine and sent a troop of armed horsemen to surround the temple. They had orders to not let anyone inside get out. Archelaus sent in soldiers and slaughtered 3,000 Jews in the temple. He commanded everyone else to go home. Passover was canceled that year. As one of his first acts as ethnarch, this made him fiercely unpopular. Now I want you to notice just how indirect all this is. Matthew is merely making a passing reference to Archelaus' status and the limits of his jurisdiction, and they fit exactly with what we learn from reading Josephus. Also, Joseph's reasons for going to Nazareth aren't clear to us until we read Josephus as well. Fictions and forgeries just aren't normally like this. Here we have positive evidence that Matthew knows the local history of his area, even though these facts are incidental to his purpose of writing. The argument from silence just isn't enough to make us doubt the slaughter of the innocents. There's just no good reason to accuse Matthew of lying.